What's up everyone, James here, and we are finally returning to the Autobot Samurai Drift. Make sure to hit that like button if you're excited that this has finally returned. So if you didn't see Drift Part 1, make sure you click the link right here or check out the pinned comment below. Another video I suggest checking out before this one is my recent video on Cybertron's Golden Age. Okay, so quick recap. In the last Drift video, it ended with Deadlock being smashed to pieces by the slavers and the Circle of Light repairing and reviving him thanks to Wing. Deadlock woke up and discovered Wing had brought him to New Crystal City. Also, quick reminder, I'm going to continue to refer to him as Deadlock until he becomes Drift. We pick up with Wing explaining to Deadlock why the Circle of Light left Cybertron. He explains once they saw that the Great War had engulfed Cybertron and saw innocent Cybertronians who wanted no part in the war were getting caught in the crossfire with little hope of survival, they convened and decided to leave Cybertron and take those Cybertronians who wanted to be free from war with them. So you really could make an argument that Dialysis' decision to leave Optimus and Cybertron wasn't entirely his decision to make during the Transformers Monstrosity series. Initially, when the Circle of Light left Cybertron, they didn't go far, but when the war spread to other planets and systems, they realized they had to take extreme measures by going somewhere totally new and hidden underground. The Circle of Light, with a population filled with scholars, scientists, and Cybertronians who chose not to fight, had created a new society, a new Cybertron. The Circle of Light had created a utopia free from sickness, poverty, and war, where every Cybertronian can live in peace, be taken care of, and not be left behind. Despite that though, Deadlock still looks at the Circle of Light's actions as cowardly, and tells Wing that Decepticon's war is righteous and is for Cybertron's future. However, Wing fires back that the war damned its future. The Cybertronian way of life was dying. He reminds Deadlock how bad Cybertronian society was even before the war, and Deadlock remembers. We just get a quick glimpse again of that flashback of his life as a discarded bot on Cybertron. When Wing poses the question to him, will he destroy this society too? Deadlock has nothing to say. Later, Wing is summoned before the Council of the Circle of Light to answer for his actions, because he brought a Decepticon to their home and revealed himself to the slavers. Wing tells the council that Deadlock is one of them, but Dialysis disagrees, because he is a Decepticon. Dialysis explains that the Circle are the guardians of Cybertron's ancient culture, who don't involve themselves with outsiders, and that nothing is more important than preserving what they are. Remember, Dialysis believes in this more than anything else, because even Omega Supreme told him that would be his purpose. If Cybertron dies, they are what's left. Wing reminds the council that the Circle is supposed to be against factions, but it seems like they've created their own. They're willing to sacrifice their compassion in order to protect themselves. That there are those out there who need them, like the prisoners of the slavers, and bots like Deadlock. However, when it comes to Deadlock, the council argues that he could influence the people of Crystal City, and that his mere presence could bring even more Decepticons. That if he were to betray them, he would destroy everything they have built. So Dialysis tells Wing the burden of being responsible for Deadlock falls on him. He orders Wing to stay with Deadlock at all times, and not to expose him to the people of the city. What happens next is honestly one of my favorite parts. Later, Wing takes Deadlock to a training room, and asks him what the Decepticon symbol stands for. Deadlock answers strength, power, and conviction. And before he can say anything else, Wing interrupts, saying superiority? So because you believe you're the strongest, you should rule? Deadlock answers yes. Wing responds, prove it then. No guns, no swords. Prove you're the strongest. Deadlock charges Wing, and no shot. In 2 moves, Wing beats him back. Deadlock charges him again, and again, in just 2 moves, Wing ends his attack. Wing says, we're going to do this every day. I'm going to give you a chance every day to prove me wrong. If you beat me, you're free to walk. Deadlock asks, if I don't, Wing answers, you're here forever. Now Deadlock tries to argue that Wing has years of hand-to-hand combat over him, whereas he has only had training in firearms. which is weird since the leader and a good amount of the Decepticons were former gladiators. You would think he would have gotten training by any one of them. Anyways, Wing's response is, "So learn, Decepticon." Weeks go by and still Deadlock hasn't been able to beat Wing. Wing taunts Deadlock, telling him if he wants to conquer the galaxy for the Decepticons, he's gonna have to do better. Deadlock reveals that isn't why he joined the Decepticons. His life on Cybertron gets revealed. He explains back on Cybertron when he was Drift, he was discarded and alone, until he was taken in by a bot named Gasket. Gasket had banded bots together like Deadlock who were forgotten by the Autobot government. They essentially became a street gang that would steal Energon in order to survive. One day though, Gasket and the crew witnessed some police brutality, and Gasket tried to intervene. The prisoner in custody fought back and the Autobot officer accidentally discharged his weapon, killing Gasket in the process. Deadlock, seeing that happen, lost it and killed the officers. That day he realized he had a gift for violence. He went into hiding, and when word of his actions reached the criminal underworld, they recruited and trained him to be a deadly warrior. While working in the criminal underworld, Drift learned how corrupt the Autobot government was. The rich became richer, and the poor in Cybertronian society suffered. He knew that that system needed to be brought down. Wing argues though that there was another way, but Deadlock refuses to believe there was. He says Megatron made him see that. He heard about the rise of Megatron and the formation of the Decepticons, and Megatron had heard about his activities in the criminal underworld. At one of the Decepticon rallies, he met Megatron and was asked by him to join the Decepticons, and Drift accepted. Megatron told him from that day on, he would be known as Deadlock. Wing says change through war and killing wasn't the way. This city is proof there was another way. It holds everything you want, equality and peace all around you. Your spark was in the right place, but somewhere along the line, you lost yourself. Megatron used all of you. You've got a second chance here. Suddenly, Wing and Deadlock get called to Crystal City's control room. Atlas and Axe inform them about a widespread transmission they've picked up that's in code, that they haven't been able to translate. Atlas asks Deadlock if he knows what it says, and Deadlock answers no, but the truth is, he does. Sometime later, Deadlock sneaks out of the city and meets with those who sent the transmission. He meets with the Slavers. The leader Braid assures him that no harm will come to him, and explains he has just struck a lucrative deal involving his escape from this planet. Deadlock asks how he used a Decepticon encoding message, and Braid answers, well, this planet is becoming quite popular with your kind. He reveals Lockdown, who says, Deadlock, Megatron is displeased. So Braid has made a deal with the Decepticons. He says, we have a deal, Lockdown. This Decepticon will give the location of his new friends, or he will never leave this planet alive. Moments later, aboard the slaver ship, Braid tells Deadlock that he has learned much about him. He explains that he knows amongst the Decepticons, he is known as a great warrior, but here on this planet, he is stranded and alone. Lockdown chimes in, telling Deadlock that word has reached Megatron that he tried to stage a coup and bring down Turmoil, and that Turmoil now seeks to take his head. That Megatron has ordered him to bring Deadlock back unharmed because he's worth too much to his plans. What those plans are, we never find out. Now Deadlock makes a very good point here. He mentions to Braid what is to stop him from killing him and Lockdown once he conquers the Cybertronians here. This is where we get a bit of history about the Slavers, and it's very interesting. Braid explains that his kind has existed for many years, and that like the Cybertronians have felt the sting of endless civil war. He basically goes on to say that his race did what the Vultramites did in Invincible. They had a civil war to kill off the weak of their race, so only the strongest of their kind remained, so they could reach their fullest potential. The slavers that remained after the dust settled had one goal: to achieve immortality. They searched the galaxy, capturing and experimenting on life forms they encountered, taking what they could from each species and upgrading themselves. However, now they seek more technological upgrades, because they view the Cybertronians as an immortal race. Braid deduces that there has to be some kind of Cybertronian settlement since Deadlock has been fully repaired since their last meeting. He asks Deadlock how many Cybertronians are there. Deadlock answers that they're well hidden and defended, and an all-out attack would be suicide. Lockdown orders Deadlock to deceive them and lead them into an ambush in order to make it easier for the slavers. Braid tells Deadlock he has one solar cycle. If he does this, his freedom is guaranteed. Deadlock agrees to it. Just before he leaves, Lockdown mentions the Cybertronians on this planet are of no concern to them, and that Megatron has faith in him, and it better not be misplaced. After meeting with the slavers and Lockdown, Drift returns to Crystal City. In his inner monologue, he questions why people fight, what do they hope to achieve, and just how far are they willing to go to get what they want. Wing confronts Deadlock, disappointed that he left. Deadlock questions him as to why he stands against the Circle of Light's laws. Wing says, "I told you when we first met, helping another is the highest cause one can aspire to. I do it because I believe it's right." This right here is the moment where Deadlock becomes Drift, because what he does next proves he is ready to move on from his life as a Decepticon. After he hears Wing's answer to his question, he immediately transforms and leaves, and charges into the Circle's council chambers, and warns them of the slavers' invasion. When Atlas asks how could he know that, Deadlock reveals he made a deal with them. He tells the council he had to do it but won't go through with it, that the message that they picked up was meant for him, that a Decepticon hunter known as Lockdown tracked them to this planet and has made a deal with the slavers, and reveals that the plan was for him to lead them into an ambush, since they don't know how many Cybertronians are here and where they are located. Atlas walks up and just backhands Drift and orders him to be locked up. Drift says, "That won't change anything. I know I'm a Decepticon, I know you hate me, but I am on your side." When one of the council members asks him why, Drift says, "Because I found something worth fighting for, and it's the right thing to do. I want what you have, and it's what I've always wanted, and if we don't fight, the slavers are going to take it all away. They will eventually find this place." Now, Atlas just blames Drift for the situation they're in. However, he is confident that they will never be found by the slavers, since they're so well hidden. He refuses to give access to the Circle's vault where they keep their weapons, and refuses to give the command for war, because they've been untouched by war this entire time, and he doesn't want to put Crystal City, its citizens, and all of Cybertron's culture at risk. Wing points out though that at the end of the day, the slavers know something is out here. He comes up with a plan that'll have Drift send the slavers to a false location that will lead them far away from the city, where he'll be waiting for them. Wing plans on sacrificing himself, but Drift reminds him that the slavers know more than one Cybertronian lives on this planet. Axe decides to aid Wing and Drift. Despite Atlas's objection, so do many more members of the Circle of Light. When he says they will all die, one of the Circle's members here, who I couldn't find their identity anywhere, so if any of you know, comment below. The member says, "You said it yourself, we are the guardians of Cybertron's culture, and we're willing to sacrifice ourselves for it." Drift confronts Atlas, asking why is he still refusing to fight when he has a fully armed army of warriors that could end the slavers for good. That Wing told him he is a seasoned veteran of many wars and the oldest of the knights. After all those battles he's been through, why is he so scared to the point that he's willing to risk everyone's lives in Crystal City? Atlas answers, "Is that what it means to be Cybertronian? To constantly be at war? I would rather be a coward than become again what war had turned you into." This is why it's so important to watch that Cybertron Golden Age video I created before this, because it turns Atlas from the self-righteous, arrogant a-hole you thought he was in Transformers Monstrosity to the pretty tragic character that we see here now, because he has been through so much war and death that he created this dream that he envisioned where they would never have to fight again in this utopia he's created, that he's refusing to let go of it even when that same utopia he's created is threatened. I'm curious, comment below what you all think about this. One solar cycle later, Wing tells Drift to send the slavers the false coordinates and informs him that the plan will be to use a crashed ship as a decoy settlement. He offers Drift an opportunity to not fight, but Drift refuses, admitting that this is his fault it's come to this. Wing says, well, since you're with us, you better look the part. At that moment, the decoy ship rises to the surface. Soon after, Braid, Lockdown, and the entire Slaver army are marching towards it. Moments later, Axe announces to the Circle their newest member has arrived. We see Drift, armed and rebuilt into a Knight of the Circle of Light. One of the other knights asks him, are you ready to go? Drift answers, I'm ready. Now, if you've been wondering what are the swords all the knights are carrying on their backs, that gets answered right now. Drift and the rest of the knights wait for the slavers to reach them. Drift asks Wing if they are all just using swords. Wing answers, we knights are forbidden to carry anything else. Drift then asks, what about the big swords? Wing explains, the great swords are ancient and older than any of us. It uses the very spark of its bearer to inflict damage to an opponent. We only draw it in times of extreme need. Drift then asks, what do you call this, as the army of slavers approaches? And I love Axe's response. He says, I call this a warm-up. The slavers reach the knights, and the battle begins. The two armies clash. Even though the knights are heavily outnumbered, they're holding their own against the slavers. This shows just how strong and skilled each one of the knights is. As the battle rages on, Atlas in the Crystal City control room is struggling with his conscience. He turns on the remote viewer to watch the battle. Back at the battle, Wing and Drift are taking out slavers left and right. Braid, watching the battle from a cliff above, notices Wing and leaps onto the battlefield to fight him. Drift tries to go and help Wing but is stopped by Lockdown. The two begin to fight and Drift is holding his own. Lockdown says, you've betrayed your kind. You're a Decepticon. What could they possibly have offered you to make you turn on us? Drift responds, what I've always wanted, the promise of a better Cybertron. Suddenly, an explosion occurs, blasting them both back. Drift, bleeding and greatly damaged, rises from the explosion and sees Wing killed by Braid. I wish I could say Wing survives, but no, he is gone. Drift and Atlas, shocked at the sight of this, yell no. Atlas walks out of the control room, asking himself how many more of his own must he lose. Drift launches himself at Braid. Unfortunately though, Drift is no match for him. He tries his best to land a blow on Braid where he can, but he is just too fast. Braid ends up striking Drift right beneath his chest plate. Drift though quickly answers back with a headbutt. However, he still ends up at the mercy of Braid. Just as Braid is about to end him, at that moment, y'all ready for this, son? Y'all ready for this? The ground beneath shakes and rumbles. Rising from the desert surface is New Crystal City. Out of its front gates comes Atlas, with the entire army of the Circle of Light at his back. He says, Cybertronians for Crystal City, charge! The Circle of Light starts annihilating the slavers' forces. Drift rises to his feet again with Wing's great sword in hand, charged by his spark. He says, Braid, we're not done yet. Drift leaps toward Braid, slicing through his spear and his body, cutting Braid in half. He then stares down Lockdown on the cliff above, who turns and walks away. I'm sorry, I had to get hyped for that because that was my favorite part of this ending. After the battle is over, Atlas bemoans Wing's death, saying it could have been prevented. He announces Crystal City will no longer be hidden from the universe. They will grow and spread their message of peace across the galaxy. He asks Drift to join the Circle of Light, but Drift refuses, at least for the moment. He tells Atlas that he wants to keep the promise he made to Wing when he first met him, to free the slaves and help them return home. When he is asked what he'll do after that, he responds he doesn't know where he belongs, that logic dictates he join the Autobots, but he isn't convinced. This to me slightly doesn't make sense, because to me joining the Circle would be the logical choice, since he said earlier he wants what they have. and they're not associated with the Autobots. Anyways, Atlas gifts Drift Wing's greatsword. He says, allow it to serve as a reminder of who you are and what you achieved today. Stay true to your path and uphold your honor. You will always be one of us. The series ends with Drift on Earth in Japan in the present day. At least the present day of when the Transformers series that was out at the time was going on. But for us, it's the future since we haven't reached there yet in the timeline. He drives through the countryside and admires the rising sun. And that's the end of Drift. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Hit the subscribe button if you want to join the Beyonders. And if you want to join the upper echelons of the Beyonder Knights, consider becoming a channel member or join the Patreon like Patreon member Justin Heverly. Links will be in a pinned comment below. Other than that, have an awesome day. And always remember, every day to transform and go beyond. See you later, Beyonders.